Now, this is a very important presentation point, but it actually goes beyond just effective presentation technique down to the effective ability to get investors interested in your business. I define where I will describe investors as a gatekeeper. So if you imagine yourself as entrepreneur, investors are gatekeepers. What does this mean? The investor controls access to a scarce and valuable resource. You as entrepreneur are trying to gain access to that resource by effectively getting the gatekeeper to open the gate and let you through. So how do you do that? The most, I think, important first step is to understand the incentives of the gatekeeper. Let's look at a gatekeeper who's a venture investor. I have a large number of incoming investment opportunities. I have to select among those incoming investment opportunities the ones that are most likely to succeed. When I make that choice, so in making that choice, invest or don't invest, I can be wrong in one of two ways. The first way I can be wrong is I can be wrong by investing in a business that fails. Now, I accept that this is going to happen, so this is not necessarily a bad thing, but let's just imagine, just remember for a minute, that's my first error. Error one is invest in a business that fails. Error two is fail to invest in a business that ultimately succeeds. So error one, invest in a business that fails. Error two, fail to invest in a business that succeeds. Which error do I prefer to make? Which? Investing in a failure. Okay, who agrees? Raise your hand. Who disagrees? Who's not sure? Who never raises their hand no matter what the question? Oh, wait a minute. Those people can't raise their hand to this question either, right? Oh, this is very deep. It's an infinite recursion. You think about that later. Okay. So I think so why would I prefer to invest in a failing business? Somebody who said that.
You can limit your loss.
Okay. I would say, okay, I think on average, I prefer to fail to invest in a business that succeeds later. Why? When I invest in a failing business, I lose money. When I fail to invest in a successful business, I give up gain. These two are not the same, right? I fail, I lose money. Fail to invest, I give up future gain. Which is more painful? Which is more painful to you? To lose money now or give up a gain in the future? Lose money now. Nobody wants to lose money now. Actually, yeah, because let's say I told you, okay, either guaranteed you're going to lose $100 today, or how about this? Guaranteed you're going to lose $10,000 today, or you're going to give up a sure $10,000 that you would have had tomorrow. Do those two feel the same? No, they don't feel the same, right? Actually, you feel much more pain from the first one. And actually, in studies of this phenomenon, we find that people feel 2.5 times more pain from the first one than the second one. But in fact, they are economically identical. Because either way, you're minus 10,000. Giving up a sure gain is the same as taking a current loss. But it's not human nature to think that way. Other practical issues, like let's say I fail to invest. Let's say I invest in a company that fails. How easy is that for a decision to be identified with me? Like, who knows that I made that decision? Everybody, right? Because it's in my fund and everybody can see that it fails. And when does that become obvious? As soon as the company fails, which can be relatively fast. When I fail to invest in a successful company, how easy is it for somebody to know that? Like, who knows? Maybe just me, or maybe nobody knows except me. I mean, and if anybody is ever going to know, it can take a long time for that information to come out. So if you invest in enough losing companies, you can actually lose your job. But giving up future gains, it's a lot harder for people to detect. So it's the same thing. You see this exact same phenomenon in hiring. Imagine you're a hiring manager. So would you prefer to hire somebody who becomes a terrible problem in a company, or would you prefer to not hire somebody who goes on to be successful somewhere else? Clearly it's the second one, right? Because that first mistake, it's clearly associated with you, the results are painful, and you see them quickly. In the second case, not true. So this creates asymmetry of negative result, creates a strong predisposition in investors and other gatekeepers to over-reject. I'll give an example from the hiring side. When I used to work at JP Morgan, I had friends that were in human resources, and they did a lot of screening of resumes, just like we're screening investment proposals in venture capital. So I remember they told me, one of my friends told me, we screen through the resumes, and if we find a resume, any resume with a spelling error or punctuation error or grammatical error, we put in a special file that we call the circular bin. The circular file. What's a circular file? It's a wastebasket, because when you look down on it, it's a circle. Yeah, so they just throw immediately all those resumes in the garbage. Why? Is it smart? Is it smart to do that? Like, couldn't it be that out of 100 resumes, the one with the spelling error is actually the best candidate? It could be, but what's the probability? Assume that the quality distribution of the resumes is relatively normal. So what's the probability that I just threw out the best one? Is very small. And then given that it had an error, the probability is even smaller. Why? When we see something like an error in a resume, we need to think, what's the cause of that error?
Inattention to detail.
Yeah, why did the person, how come out of our 100 resumes, 90 were without error and 10 were with error? Maybe the person doesn't pay attention to detail. Maybe the person is sloppy. Maybe they're rushed. Maybe they don't realize that the other 90 resumes are going to be perfect. So whatever the reason, it's a defect. This person has a defect. Therefore, the chance that they're the best candidate goes even further down. To take an even more extreme case, I had a student that used to work in another investment bank, and the way that they would screen resumes, they would take 100 resumes, they would randomly shuffle, and then they would just reject the top 50. Because they didn't want to hire unlucky people. Yeah. If your resume was in the top half, you're unlucky, therefore reject. So this is an extreme example, but it illustrates what? Predisposition to reject. When we have large number of incoming resumes or business plan, we can reject for almost any reason and still come out ahead. So what does this tell us from the presentation side? From the get past a gatekeeper side? We need to avoid getting screened out in the first round, because this is the easiest place to avoid getting screened out. Like, typically investors don't reject people that are not lucky, but they will reject anybody who demonstrates some flaw in the first presentation. So I have seen investors that reject people based on like bullet points or the wrong color or size in the PowerPoint slides, or they just can't answer one of the questions in the investment presentation. or they don't pay attention to detail, or they say something in the presentation that we call a red flag, meaning a strong indication that there's something defective about this plan or this team. So investors are always looking for that excuse to reject, and therefore you need to avoid that, especially at the beginning. After the investor gets to know you a little better, then they probably won't do this. But at the initial stage, we want to screen out anybody that looks weak. And I'm going to try to give you some tips now on how to avoid getting screened out in the first round. But the good news about this is, like, anybody can do this, right? Like, how hard is it to create a one-page executive summary without spelling error? Is that hard? It's easy. Like 10-year-old can do it. And now with spell check, everybody can do it. Then when if I get a business plan with a spelling error, I think, doesn't the person know how to use spell check? I mean, how credible does that make you look? I'm an entrepreneur, I'm going to create $1 billion business, but I can't even use spell check on my computer. Or I don't even know I'm supposed to use spell check. So, right, so either one of those, reject. Good news is you spend a little more time on this, then you rise above all the other candidates that failed to do this.